Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, August 5th, 2024. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We are live at City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Don Preston, absent. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Chernowski, absent. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills is here, and we have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business today. Also like to introduce staff it takes to run a meeting. And if you would raise your hand as I call names, Lynn Cohen, Communications Specialist, Corey Schenko, Building and Licensing. I don't know his true title, Building and Mary Allen, the Planning and Development, and Womack City Secretary, City Manager Taylor Tedder, City Solicitor Alex Burns, Assistant City Manager Evan Miller, Chief Keith Banks of the Police Department, Henry Matlos, Public Works Supervisor, and I think we got everything. Thank you all for being here. I'd also like to thank all those that are watching virtually from the comfort of their home, but also thank all the in-person members here. As you know, if you've been to meetings before, we have certain agenda topics, and certain ones we'll call on you and make it available for the public to have the opportunity to do comments. We are timing the comments and restricting them to 3 minutes. I also like to remind everybody that support documents, those are documents. Here's 48 pages of documents that support our agenda topics are available online. Go to cityrehoboth.com, look up our meeting date, and you'll be able to search for all the documents that we see and are using up here. With that, I want to mention that the correspondence is also embedded in the agenda when it's received a sufficient time ahead of the meeting. And you have the agenda in front of you so you can see who has sent in correspondence. And we will address some of them directly today. With that, I'm going to move right on to the city manager's report. Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor and Board of Commissioners. The first item that I'd like to mention today are city finances. I want to let commissioners and the public know that I and our staff have heard them loud and clear regarding the desire for more transparency and openness related to city finances. This will be one of my highest ongoing priorities. We understand that it's imperative to have clear messaging and to tell our story well and to present firm numbers and realistic revenue and expense estimates. Several initiatives are underway. The FY24 budget publication is being finalized to ensure that the city continues to attain the Government Finance Officer Association's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, which requires that the budget documents excel as a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, and communications tool. We are exploring the possibility of creating additional budget documents, which I believe will make the city's financial information more readily accessible and even easier to understand. And I'm also contemplating digital platforms that would open the city's day-to-day financial interactions to public access. I'll keep you all up to date as we make progress in this area and continue to strive for excellence. Beach Patrol update. If you've walked by the Beach Patrol project site in the last few days, you've noticed that things are starting to go vertical. 90% of the foundation concrete piles have been poured, and the focus for the next month will be installing CMUs, the concrete masonry units, and associated electrical conduit and plumbing. The Public Works Director did approve a change order for $2,714 for modifications required for the addition of a time capsule in the exterior masonry wall. The wastewater partnership. So last week, city staff met with representatives from Sussex County to discuss the status of their responses to the information requests made during the July 8th Commissioners' Workshop meeting. Sussex County and Lewis BPW are finalizing those responses and plan to present them at the September workshop meeting to the full Board of Commissioners. City staff is currently identifying potential engineering consultants to conduct a risk and financial assessment of the proposal. Rehoboth Avenue paving. So at DelDOT's request, permission has been granted to start the Rehoboth Avenue repaving project immediately after September 15, about 2 weeks earlier than originally planned. This will work to everyone's benefit with the hope that the project can be completed before weather gets too cold, as all the work will be done overnight. Working hours will be 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. daily from Sunday evening through Friday morning. The contractor, Adel, will begin at the drawbridge and head east, loop around the front of the bandstand restrooms, and then work their way west on Rehoboth Avenue to the Circle. The Circle will be fully repaved, but the westbound side of Rehoboth Avenue between the Circle and drawbridge will not, as this work was done recently. Prior to paving, concrete work will occur on crosswalks and are not to current ADA standards. DelDOT requirements are that the road must be paved within 7 days after milling. DelDOT and ADEL have committed to working closely with the city and the Chamber of Commerce for Sea-Witch preparations. No work will occur after 6 a.m. Thursday, October 23rd in preparation for Sea-Witch weekend, and all surfaces will be paved for that weekend. Note that all of this is part of the DelDOT project, and ADEL will be doing paving work on the other side of Route 1 on Shuttle Road and Country Club Road starting this week. Coordination meetings between the Police Department, Public Works, and DelDOT regarding required traffic control have already taken place. Business license update. Over the past calendar year, the building and licensing team, in partnership with the IT department, has worked to clean up their data set related to business licenses, including for brick and mortar businesses and contractors. Many accounts that are no longer in business have been inactivated, and given that this review and cleanup has not previously been undertaken, the business license data set from last year is not as robust as this year's, making a year-to-year comparison a bit problematic. Moving forward, building and licensing will review and adjust building license data as a necessary part of our standard operating practice before business license renewals are set out in January. Having said that, 2024 business license categories included 691 apartment rental licenses, 625 house rental licenses, 648 general contractors, 119 general retail, 45 restaurants with no alcohol, 64 restaurants with alcohol, 10 grocery and convenience, and 10 property management licenses. And last but not least, the city's building and grounds team has assumed responsibility for cleaning the bandstand facilities. We believe that our team can do an outstanding job, and it will not only help save money and remove the need for an outside contractor. So I'm here for any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Go ahead, Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you, City Manager Tedder, for addressing the city finances issue right out of the gate, because I am still quite overly exercised about the discussion we had on July 19th, and I will probably remain that way for the rest of the year. But the question that I really have about it, there are two. The first one is the tax increase that was handed to our constituents, to me, was done without the full picture. Do you have any observations or comments on that particular situation that I think we're in?
So it is looking at financial year 24 and the other fiscal year that we were looking at. So the surplus was in the prior fiscal year, and then we were looking at revenue and expense for the fiscal year that we're currently in. Of course, knowing what that surplus was would help frame how you wanted the revenue to be, whether you wanted fund balance to be included in that, which we'll be talking about the fund balance policy today. So that will help guide the process for the future. And then I just believe, in local government especially, having firm numbers up front will help us in the future. So that's kind of what I can offer related to that.
So are you saying the bottom line for the tax increase is it is what it is, even though information might have been presented differently for us? Are there no options for that whatsoever other than it has to be maintained?
The tax rate's set every year, so it could be adjusted in the future.
I would hope the 5 remaining commissioners will think about that come July, I guess, of 2025, of the impact of what we did, how it was done, and in my opinion, as you've all heard before, that should never, ever, ever happen again. So thank you for addressing it without having to be asked. Also, City Manager, you just talked about exploring the possibility of different publications or ways to represent where we are. Are you saying we're going to explore that, or are you saying we're going to do it?
We're currently in the exploratory phase, but we're definitely doing it.
Okay.
So my thought is to have a brochure for our governmental funds and one for our capital improvement plan, and also do a popular annual financial statement. So then we can go for the Triple Crown Award from the Government Finance Officers Association as well. All of those things would help provide to not only you, but the public, easily digestible formats of information about our budget and about our capital plans. And it would also communicate how our revenues are budgeted as well. So I think it would really help provide the full picture to everyone.
Do you have a timeline on when you expect to see some documentation or documents or postings for the public or anything?
I would think in the next 3 months.
90 days? Thank you.
Anybody else? Patrick?
Yes, following along on the financial issue, thank you for bringing that forward. Something that I would like to explore, and possibly as a precursor to the development of the budget for next year, to me, the taxing is set by our charter, but we can change the charter. So I would like to investigate perhaps looking at the availability of changing the date the tax rate is set, perhaps to a later period of time, so that we have more information based on that. And I would like that discussion to happen as a precursor for the development of the budget. And also the investigation of changing the fiscal year. Again, that is, we have challenges with revenues and expenses, of a lot of revenues coming in during certain times of the year, and then we have less revenues coming in, but we have equal expenses. So to investigate perhaps changing the actual fiscal year that we're dealing with, I think would just like to investigate it. This may solve some of the issues of having appropriate data at a time that would be more helpful in development of the budget, also looking at revenue expenses, and also the setting of the tax rate. All of those are controlled within the charter, which leads me to my next question, that we have several items in front of us that are requiring charter changes, and I would like to see a discussion of that at the either November or December workshop, of a listing and timing of expected charter changes, of how we are going to approach them, the reasoning for them, and the approach of the calendar as what happens. Obviously, there's an election in November, so our representation will change, but we need to be prepared to hit the ground running with those charter changes and amendments to update the charter as we see it. So again, I would like to see it November, but depending on the workload, what have you, but I think that December would be acceptable also.
Okay, yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Tim?
So the along the lines of the budget, I'm just curious, as the 2.7 million surplus that we learned about last July, is that a firm number? Or will that just keep moving?
It should be a firm number. It should be, yes.
And there lies the problem. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
One other follow-up I made back to the paving plan for Rehoboth Avenue. Since it's a joint project with DelDOT, is there a communication plan established to talk to our businesses and residents about the timing? Again, DelDOT may be controlling part of it, we control or involved in part of it. I know that there was a joint communication plan established when we did the streetscape for Rehoboth Beach, for Rehoboth Avenue, rather, that was done in conjunction with DelDOT. And I'd just like to investigate that if we can prepare a similar thing again so that we can keep our businesses and residents informed of what's going on, DelDOT and the city. So,
Sure, I'll look into that.
thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you. Walter, did you have a question? Remember, we have a 3-minute time limit?
No, I think it's ridiculous. You want to tell me that?
I don't, that's all right.
I've spoken with Henry and Evan, but I haven't had a chance. Just a heads up. At the last meeting, there was some comment about water going to Henlopen Acres because they had a well problem, and obviously we sell water to Dewey Beach, the county, and we had odd and even days, and I was wondering if the board was informed and maybe they would tell everybody why the well was pulled out at the Lynch wells here in high season. I expected to see Henry listed on the report, and Mr. City Manager, somebody, you don't pave Rehoboth Avenue in the middle of the summer, so did we have a well problem? I heard it was scheduled maintenance.
And Henlopen Acres?
I understood Henlopen Acres had a well problem, and we opened the valves, which that's why they're there. My question is, why did we pull a well in the middle of the summer?
Walter, excuse me, we had some scheduled maintenance from inspection that was done a few months ago for, I believe it was well 3R over at Lynch Well.
I understand your statement, scheduled maintenance, but you don't pave Rehoboth you don't paint Rehoboth Avenue, or excuse me, pave Rehoboth Avenue in the middle of summer. When you're in the middle of a water situation, you're going odd even days request, which was innovative, which was a good idea. But why did we pull it? You don't schedule something like that in the middle of the summer. The other question is, on State Road, there is an air cleaner. Is it online yet? Because the smell down there is terrible.
No, it is not. Expect it to be online this week.
It was to be done by the end of the month. This is very, very poor that the gases being burned off are not, and that the piece of equipment is basically out of service. The other one was a question, and I appreciate Evan answering the question. Is everyone aware of the fact that with the committee meetings and all of them that we had for a year and a half about the crosswalks, and maybe everybody in the room needs an update on what's going to happen to the crosswalks and whether they're going to be paved over or up to. But basically, ADEL, under the state contract, is going to wipe them out. Or correct me on that so people aren't screaming what happened to the nice crosswalks.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. your name and who you
Craig
are.
Thier, 102 Laurel Street. Mr. Tedder, I support many of the things that you have proposed from the Finance Department. The one thing that makes me very uncomfortable is when Commissioner Bennett asked you, is the $2.7 million surplus going to change? You hesitated and said, I don't think so. Your numbers need to be accurate, right? If your numbers are not accurate, the commissioners can't trust you. And if you're not comfortable or you're not sure if it's going to be 2.7 million, your response to Mr. Bennett and I think Mrs. Sharp prior to that, or Ms. Sharp prior to that was, well, it's 2.7, but there are these, maybe 2 or 1 or 4 variables that may change that. That would help them understand whether the number, that'll help them understand why you're not affirmatively saying, no, it's not going to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. This is,
May I?
yeah.
May I oppose the bench, Your Honor?
You have a question for the city manager? Is that
Yes,
what?
I do.
Okay.
And let me just address the previous question. So until the audit is completely finalized, that number is in the audit. So that's the only,
When is that? Do we know when it's finalized?
it should be in the next, Evan, is it a month? Another month? Yeah, so I would think within the next 60 to 90 days for sure.
So that's why I would be supportive of what Commissioner Gossett said, that the new group of commissioners or the new seated board take a look at the processes just to make sure we don't run into this issue again where we get surprised in July about surpluses.
I agree. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Your
I'm Bill
name
Broderick, and I
and
live at
relationship to the city?
102 St. Lawrence. On the agenda item, there's very little detail, and it appears to be potentially a major delegation of council responsibility to staff. I don't think I need to remind the council of the fact that they've raised our property taxes 29%, which was unnecessary, as Ms. Sharp has pointed out, because of the money that a staff person was concerned was not going to come from the feds, which it always was going to come from the feds. My question is, will there be a transparent, full council decision every time this so-called change is enacted? I apologize. So what guidelines, what ropes will you have to make sure that the council is still the body that makes all budget decisions? What you're contemplating is having a budget, changing the budget in midstream without any details about how it's going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move on to City Solicitor's report. Alex Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners, members of the public. I just have a quick update on the 330 Hospitality Group litigation. You may recall this was a, this stems from
I'm
a...
sorry. The acoustics in here are fantastic. We can hear you speaking, and whether you're back row or front row. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just have a quick update on the 330 Hospitality Group case. You may recall this case involves a change of zoning application regarding a parcel of land at the intersection of State Road and Rehoboth Avenue. The property is split zoned. The portion of the property along Rehoboth Avenue is zoned commercially, and the portion along State Road is residential. And so the applicant attempted to have the property rezoned. The Planning Commission denied that rezoning request, and thereafter the Board of Commissioners denied that rezoning request. Initially, the case went to the Court of Chancery. It made its way to Superior Court, where it currently resides. And on July 23rd, the Judge Robinson in the Superior Court in Sussex County remanded the matter back to the city for a new hearing. Interestingly, the court pontificated on the standard of review for rezoning matters. So generally, in the past, zoning matters are legislative functions. So change of law, amending current law. The court held that in certain cases, there's a caveat to that general rule. If there is a individual parcel being zoned, it is a quasi-judicial function to review that application in the court's view. And so the court has remanded it back to the city for further proceedings. I don't want to get too far into the merits right now because it's still an ongoing matter, but that's just a quick update. I'm hoping to speak with the lead attorney, Daniel Griffith, later this week to see exactly how this is going to play out. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I may, for clarification on that, you had mentioned the lead attorney. This was handled by an outside firm?
Correct.
Could you kind of inform us on that aspect?
Yep, so that was Dan Griffith. He's a partner with Whiteford, Taylor, and Preston LLC out of Wilmington, and he was the lead attorney on this case.
So the issue will come back to the council for discussion again? Is that the?
That's correct, yeah.
Net.
It'll come back for discussion.
And a vote?
A vote, correct. Okay. And a new record, a new hearing, a quasi-judicial application, quasi-judicial function really, is the application of existing law to a particular fact pattern. So it's not the creation of new law, it's application to application of an existing law to a particular fact pattern. So it'll come back, there'll be a new record developed. That's what I believe will happen.
So then if the vote was the same, does it just, is that the end of it, or does it can it go through an appeal process again, or?
Possibly the end.
Okay.
It's still a live matter right now.
Okay, thank you.
So would this be, has it been determined yet whether it's on the record or de novo?
This would be on the record. The cities generally have quite a bit of discretion over zoning matters, and this would be reviewed on the record by the court.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to the first item of old business, discuss an ordinance to amend Chapter 270 of the Municipal Code by amending Sections 270-4 and 270-21B relating to the definitions of basement and non-habitable basement and habitable basement, crawl space, floor finish, wall finish, and gross floor area, plus amending the gross floor exemption for qualifying basements, regulating certain existing non-habitable basements. If you recall, we've talked about this many times, and we've had different iterations. We're actually at the point where we have adopted a resolution at a previous meeting, scheduling a hearing for our mid-August regular meeting to have a public hearing in this matter because it's amending the zoning code, which requires a public hearing. And this is on the agenda, and actually the agenda item report does a good job explaining why. And that's because there are a few wordsmith and changes that we thought needed to be presented publicly prior to the public hearing. And so I'm almost ready to turn it over to you, and that we also had a little goof on our part that we embedded version 3 in the agenda, and it should have been version 4, I think. And so there are 3 bits of communications, correspondence we received, some apropos, some not. But that's what I'd like you to, if you could, start at the beginning, if you will, and give us your take on the difference between version 3 and version 4, and then the 3 bits of correspondence. Because I know there are some questions asked by some of the correspondents that I think are apropos and worthwhile addressing here today. Corey?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners, City Manager, and everyone here. This is really just to go over a few minor corrections to the new version. And I do understand there's still some questions out there. We will still hold the public comment, but I hope with this small presentation, I can go over just the small changes and really clarify what may be some lingering questions out there that we've received in correspondences. I'll start with the version 4. There's a couple different colors of texts. The blue and red texts are from what the first versions were, and those really write the intention of this. If we could, Mayor, if you have control.
Yeah.
I see the agenda item report here. I'm just going to go over a very few basic changes that were made in version 4. The first one was that we had some wordsmithing to do.
Let me find out where we are. We're got a new system here. We're trying to. So where would you like to be, Corey?
If we have the attachments,
Scroll down to the, yeah, and, oop,
Resolution or the actual
the
ordinance?
resolution was untouched. It was Exhibit A for the draft ordinance.
going.
You want the ordinance? Exhibit A.
Yes, sir. Great. So at the very bottom of this first page, residential was just used twice by accident. And it's to call out, residential has different codes than the commercial building code. One of them is the stipulations that in residential codes, and this goes in line with the property maintenance code, basements and other rooms such as bathrooms and storage rooms shall have a ceiling height of not less than 6 feet 8 inches, whereas in the building code, commercial code, nothing's less than 7 feet. So we just wanted to put that in there. And then the second clause there, the second change on line 44, was to adjust the fact of 6 feet 8 inches, as that is the primary concern that we're going with, because 6'6" was never meant to be allowed in our adopted building code. The next change doesn't occur until lines 138 and 139. And this change was meant to remove an inconsistency as far as the definition goes for gross floor area, so that the definition, the main definition of gross floor area will include habitable basements. So that's going to be any basement that's 7 feet or more. And then instead of saying equal to, less than or equal to, it just says less than 6'8" will be excluded. And that's because any basement, or excuse me, any space that's not a basement, that's not particularly excluded, would be included in gross floor area if it's 6'8" or higher. Which leads it down to the very bottom of the page, number 174. And this is a specific section of our zoning code. Gross floor area in single-family and two-family dwelling unit is deemed to exclude non-habitable basements. So any basement moving forward that fits the definition of non-habitable basement would be excluded from floor area ratio. The next one was line 177. And this one here, the only reason that we changed this was so that it would be identical to the wording of Part 1 of the residential. The actual floor space of all areas at or above 7 feet, and that's for commercial buildings, because you can't build anything less than 7 feet. And we removed the word habitable because there's provisions and loopholes in the code where they call out certain areas of buildings that aren't habitable, so this would keep the status quo. On line 191, the word 8 was placed in there from an earlier version, so we just had to include that in there to wipe it away. That entire line goes away. I'm talking about 6 foot 6 inches. And that is the only changes that were made to version 4 that I'd like to go over, so that we have that. None of the intent or substantive changes take place because of this version. It's really just to kind of clean up some language and to have logical consistency throughout it. The next one, I'll just, we did receive some correspondence. I'd like to just speak briefly to that. This correspondence comes if I'm allowed to read the names.
Yeah.
Okay, from and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Tina Alexander. And they had some questions primarily about these existing basements that, have been able to be built here for the last 20 years. There's some provisions in the zoning ordinance that say no additional features shall be allowed. And the intent of that is if you have a basement currently and it was a 6-foot 6-inch basement and your house is built, you had your certificate of occupancy issued, or you're actively working under a current permit that allows you to build these spaces, and it is finished, or with the intent of it being finished with rooms inside of it right now, since we're working under the existing code, you're allowed to just keep going on with construction or to keep what you have. The word additional in there is that you just can't do even more. So this allows you to keep everything you have in your basements now. If you have rooms down there, if you have finished walls, finished floors, bathrooms, and the like, you're allowed to keep everything that you have. You just can't add more to it. And then we also allowed for routine maintenance. So we're not going to let your basements go dilapidated. You can certainly do repairs. So I wanted to really make sure that that's on record. That's the intent of this ordinance. You just can't continue to add additional features. It's the same way if you had a non-conforming house on a lot. You could maybe do certain things to your house, but you couldn't put on a whole addition. You can't do new work. The next email we received from Francis Kelleher. Thank you for your involvement with this, Francis. I understand your concern was with the wording of Part C, and this, Mayor, if you could scroll to lines.
Yep.
It's under the definition of gross floor area, lines 113 through 117. This is the one area of an exception that we allowed for non-habitable basements. And what this section allows for is levels of finish and/or electrical upgrades, and that includes plumbing, mechanical gas, that would be allowed to be put in basements if it's required per the manufacturer's instructions installation manual, or per their listing and label, or per our adopted building codes. That level of finish is tied to the appliance that's used. It's not tied to the basement. So, and this also, it's written in such a way that in 20 years from now, if we have, totally different pool equipment or geothermal heat pumps and stuff, and the technology changes, they require certain things, it's written in such a way that it evolves with it. What it doesn't allow is for desires or wants. So if you have a laundry down there with a washer and dryer, the dryer is going to require an electrical upgrade for a higher ampage, and then the washer is going to need plumbing in there to get the wastewater out and to get water in. And so you're allowed to have those certain elements, but what you wouldn't be able to do then is build 2 more walls around it and a 3rd wall with the door there to have a whole room, because that would be a recommendation maybe, or a want of a property owner rather than as a requirement by code. So that's what this letter C is that these walls, partitions, finishes, electrical upgrades pertaining to mechanical utility appliances, including but not limited to, and then these are, the bulk of the appliances that we see down in basements, where at any point in time they may require finishes, and so this allows basements to have those finishes. The third correspondence that we received was from Alex Kogan, and I think that they had a good, valid concern about perimeter walls in basements. And if the commissioners would like to talk about this at the public meeting, we certainly can. But this deals with either fully enclosing small portions of basements that contain mechanical utility appliances or laundry equipment, and then also if there's a safety risk of finishing the perimeter walls in the basement. I just spoke about the closing off areas of a utility room or a laundry room. Right now, this would not allow for that. It would only allow for things that are required, not a recommendation. So right now, this ordinance would not allow for any of that. As far as the exterior walls go, we have a special provision in here under the definition of finished wall, which is on the very next page, Mayor, on this one here, 131 through 133. So what we allowed for was insulation at the tail end of line 132. Insulation materials with a minimum R value of R10 are permitted and excluded from this definition. R10 is used because we're in climate zone 4, so under that climate zone where we're at, you need a minimum of R10 insulation. And this can be done usually by continuous, a lot of times it's the color blue, it's a foam board, or you have the white insulation blankets on top. And this doesn't pose any safety risk. It really just helps to keep the house energy compliant, especially if you're going to condition the basement. What we tend to have, we use a depth to water table that's done with the University of Delaware with their geotechnical science centers. It doesn't just map the floodplain, it maps the depth of the water in wet periods too. And if the basement goes below a certain, or if that water goes up above a certain level, we force the foundation walls to be waterproofed, not damp-proofed. So you're really worried about water intrusion in your foundation walls. As far as having drywall down there, it would be a recommendation, not a requirement. We would allow for the finish of ceilings, but what this ordinance really just does is to help try to weave that line when we were first talking about this, to either completely cut the idea of non-habitable basements out of the picture, to only have a 4-foot crawl space or a 7-foot basement, or to allow for that intent to have the storage space, free storage space. That was, we believe, the spirit of the 2006 first ordinance, but also to reduce the risk of unlawful conversions in the most restrictive way that we could while keeping free storage space. So what this ordinance does in the spirit of that is to allow free storage space while only allowing the minimum requirements of levels of finish in these spaces.
Allowing insulation, and I didn't understand drywall. It was a recommendation, not a requirement. So insulation and drywall would be acceptable on the perimeter walls only?
Well, no, drywall would not be allowed on the perimeter walls. The insulation would.
Okay.
And the drywall would be allowed on the ceiling. We didn't make any mention of finished ceilings for fire protection of floors and also for people to have adequate lighting on their ceilings.
Very good. Thank you, Corey. Good job. So we've clarified the difference between version 3 and version 4. We're looking at version 4. When we get to the public hearing, then the expectation is we would really be, and we'll make an announcement, be discussing version 4. Is that acceptable? And that if amenable, then the motion would be made relative to version 4. Is that all right? Any other questions?
As a follow-up, I appreciate all the work that is done on this. And I think I've expressed before, this code, the way you've just explained things, interpreted, and I think I've mentioned before that we hope you're here for eternity, but to implement this in other regulations, in other municipalities or other government institutions, there are, if you will, rules and regs that oversee a codified piece of legislation that talks about the interpretation of that. We fail to do that. Is there any ability, and I looked also to Director Gray for a response on this perhaps at the next meeting, to have that material or interpretation available for the next generation, if you will? This is something that we have not done before, and I feel that it is lacking on our part, but certainly with a new city manager, perhaps we can explore this option for what I refer to as rules and regs and interpretation. Not as a part of this necessarily, but just going forward. And I also understand that one of the concerns with basements is health and safety, which is one of my major concerns with the reasoning for going forward with this. And I also, again, through conversations with Director Gray and others, understand that the Building and Licensing Department code enforcement is also working very strenuously to develop and implement a program of inspections and processes of this. And this, to me, goes hand in glove. And I don't know if we have scheduled a presentation or if we have a calendar scheduled or potential of when that would be presented or when that enforcement will be in full swing. But I would certainly hope that that could be referred to, again, as part of maybe not necessarily the public hearing, but just to keep informed that, to me, this is a two-step process of defining basements, of defining life safety, but also the enforcement of this material. So I look forward to those kind of conversations in the next meeting or when we are fully prepared to make those types of presentations, hopefully within the next 60 to 90 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions up here on basements? Again, we have that scheduled for our regular meeting in August 6th, 16th, beginning at 2 p.m. With that, we're going to move on to the next item of old business, B, which is review and discuss city's fund balance and net position policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, members of the public. I know Taylor's going to start it off, but Ann, if you could switch the controls over to the lectern, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Board of Commissioners. So I just wanted to open this item up. Today, we're really looking for you to focus on one thing, and that is the levels within the fund balance policy. So with this latest iteration, it went to 30% of the general fund and 30% in both the water and wastewater funds. But I just wanted to provide that disclaimer that that's kind of what we're wanting to focus on today. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Evan.
Sure. Thanks, Taylor. So again, included in the agenda is an agenda item report, which we have elaborated a little bit further on from previous agenda item reports on this topic. And then also included in the agenda item report is the revised fund balance policy. I wanted to touch on a few changes that we had made to the policy. As Taylor had indicated, we have reduced the operating percentages from 60% to 30% in the general fund and from 50% to 30% in both the water and wastewater funds. Additionally, we did take a look at the natural disaster line. This was requested at the last meeting when this topic was presented, and that was to take a look at some of the actual costs that we've incurred for repairs as a result of natural disasters. So in actually going back through some of the meeting minutes from prior years as well as the fixed asset records, we were able to find, and it mentions this a little bit in here, about in 1991 there was a storm that damaged the north end of the boardwalk, and a bid was accepted in 1992 to repair the damage, and that was about $1,045,000. It was unclear from the meeting minutes how much of the boardwalk was damaged or repaired, but again, that shows that back in 1991, we saw over $1 million in repairs from a natural disaster on the boardwalk. Also, I think a more recent example, and I also said in here, just jumping back, that retaining walls and decking was also done around the Henlopen at a cost of about $60,000. More recent example, in 2009 and 2010, I think most people who are, have been in the city for quite a while would recall this. The entire boardwalk was reconstructed. The total cost at the time was $8,182,334. We did have some conversations with a construction estimator to try and get a little bit more information about where really the market's trended related to construction costs. So we've talked with the chief estimator, and based on their annual market research, we saw that between 2010 and 2020, the market experienced, or the industry experienced, an average of 6% increases year over year. From 2020 to 2021, there was a 25% increase. From 21 to 2022, 20%. 2022 to 23, 10%. And then since 23, it's been about 6% each year. So what does that mean? Based on that construction price inflation, it's estimated that the same project to reconstruct the boardwalk in 2010 for $8 million would be a little bit over $25 million today, which is obviously a significant cost, certainly one that I was not expecting to see. But again, that there's a little bit more data that we were able to receive to kind of give us an estimate as to how much that would cost today. That's really what I have to offer. As Taylor had mentioned, we're really just trying to get some input from the commissioners in terms of the comfort level with the way that we've approached this policy. Right now, for the general fund, natural disaster funding, we previously had $4 million in there. We have put $9 million in there, really just using that estimate that we had at the 8.1 million. It was just last week that towards the end of last week, that we received that additional information from the market. And obviously, it would be difficult for us at this point to put $25 million in natural disaster if there was even a desire to do that. So for now, we have $9 million in the natural disaster funding. We have not adjusted the water or wastewater natural disaster lines. So in the net position policy there, we continue to have $2 million. So just a little additional context for the commissioners. I had a thought this morning for the sake of trying to get some additional input on the policy, and certainly if the commissioners would be in agreement with this, this is an idea that we had, would be we could, once we get comfortable with the framework of the policy, we could then present this policy to the audit committee just to get another level of sort of oversight and input on this policy. And we could work with the committee to come up with a revised recommendation and bring that back before the Board of Commissioners. Just a thought if there's additional information that you might want or additional input you might need for this policy. That's really all I have to offer, so thank you.
Evan,
Oh, go ahead.
the percentages that we had been using previously, the 50% and the 60%, why are they so high?
Sure. So the 60% in the general fund was used because at the time we were trying to ensure that we had enough money in the fund balance to cover 6 months of seasonal operating expenses. So we wanted to ensure that, again, because of the seasonal aspect of being a coastal town, we wanted to plan for the worst, and that was a summer season where we had no revenue coming in, whether it was because of a natural disaster or a downturn in the economy, nobody was coming. Again, it was pretty aggressive at 6 months, but we used 6 months in the general fund. It was 60% in the general fund because we do see expenses rise a little bit in the general fund during the summer. That's not the same for water and wastewater. Those expenses tend to remain consistent seasonally and in the off-season as well. So that's why we stuck to the 50%.
And I've heard these explanations before. I just wanted us to get them back on the record again. And I'm very curious, and I believe I've asked it before as well, is we've never had a fund balance policy before, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
And why now? What advantage does this give us that we have not yet had before?
Sure. So I think this is one additional tool that sort of goes towards the transparency on the city's finances. This gives, and really we've included the figures in here to give you an example of how the policy would be applied year over year. So again, the policy kind of sets a framework. Certainly it's something that we wanted to have in place just to ensure that whatever is in the fund balance is in the net position is something that was reviewed and approved by certainly the Board of Commissioners. There's input from the public. But more importantly, one of the goals too is that if the city does have an excess in the fund balance, that there's a plan for using that excess. That is sort of towards the tail end of as we refine this policy and get ready to approve the policy. There's two other aspects, and that is What happens if the fund balance or net position dips below what's required under the fund balance? What is the plan to replenish that? And then the second is what can be done if there's an excess? I had mentioned, I think I had included it in the agenda item report, that the GFOA states that in all cases, use of those funds should be prohibited as a funding source for ongoing recurring expenses. So again, if there's a surplus in either the net position or the fund balance, that we have a plan to sort of use those funds. Sort of the idea that I think we had was for capital expenditures, large-scale capital expenditures that we might have in a given fiscal year, where again, there's an option to not raise additional revenue for those expenditures, but to tap into the fund balance if there is in excess.
So what is our plan for the current surplus that we've recently been made aware of?
So we do not have a plan for it just yet. I will say that the revised policy does have updated figures for the unassigned fund balance and the net position, and that was reflective of the most recent surplus.
So what are we doing with the surplus?
So right now,
Where is it right now?
it hasn't been really earmarked for anything. It is in the fund balance, and it's been included, fund balance and net position, it's been included within the figures that are presented in the policy.
Well, I want to hearken back to Commissioner Bennett's question of just a few minutes ago, I think, of whether or not everything that we're looking at from a numerical standpoint, if these are firm numbers. And I just think our numbers are a moving target. So having a fund balance policy in front of me, I'm going to say I don't have any confidence in the numbers that I've seen since January. My opinion is the numbers have changed. I have lots of pieces of paper with different bottom line numbers on them. So for me, I don't have any confidence in the way we're doing things right now. And what troubles me is putting a policy in place that's predicated on the way we are doing things right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else, but it's very troubling to me. I already have asked about the tax increase, and I'm of a mind that the way I would refer to that tax increase is that it was unnecessary and it should be repealed. If we can institute a tax increase, seems reasonable to me, we can repeal something. I don't know what the mechanics are, but I'm troubled by this whole situation, as I have been for some time. This is not new, I don't think, coming from me. And if no other commissioners seem to have any uneasiness or whatever, I'm certainly well prepared to be a minority of one.
I'd like to weigh in if I could. We've had this conversation before, and I'm not going to go over it again. I think ultimately with this exercise, we will be able to create a policy that will, as Evan has said, that will give us more flexibility and certainly more understanding and choices with regard to the issue that I think I would just say, if I can say succinctly, that in our procedures and processes in order to develop the budget, that we would have the ability, and I mean, I think it would have been, to answer your question, that if we had the ability and knowing that we had this anticipated surplus, we could have, and having a policy, we could have dealt with it so that we did not increase the property tax. And correct me if I'm wrong, the amount of the property tax increase was somewhere in the vicinity of $500,000, somewhere in the, somewhere around there. So we're not even talking millions of dollars for that, even though it's 30% or whatever. But I just want to kind of put it in the realm of, it was around $500,000. And that was effectively what we use to plug the budget so that we have a balanced budget. And I would anticipate in this process that we will be able to have an additional decision to make with regard. I mean, one thing I would just like to also say that when we say fund balance, that's an accounting term. It really means it's our savings. This is all the various bank accounts. This money exists in some form or another, and obviously it's very complicated, but we have this money in the bank. And this also answers the question, is the city broke? The city is not broke because we have this, okay? Now, the other comments that we had talking about with regard transparency, so the public, both us and the public will be able to sort of readily be able to see, hopefully in some kind of presentation, exactly where our cash status is. We should be able to do that, and I think that's something that we hope to do. So this is going to be a confounding process, but I think ultimately we will be able to effectively adjust how much cash we have in the bank, and we have like more cash than we think we would need, that we can use that cash for some purpose. And I would think in the budgetary process, if we applied more cash, let's say to capital projects that are part of our capital plan, that would free up other cash, would it not, for the operating side? I think that's the other thing that I think we need to consider, that we operate as a city much the way a business operates. We have to maintain certain sort of accounting standards with regard to matching of periods and matching expenses with revenues and all this other kind of stuff, which you may not be sort of totally, top of mind about. But we can accomplish this, and I think deal with this. And I agree with you in your statement where you said we didn't need to do this. Had we had the mechanism to do this, we would not have needed to do it. I agree with you. Okay. So I'm encouraged by this. I think that's basically my statement, is that we can figure this out. We can come up with a policy. It will be much better for everybody concerned, ourselves and the public.
Go ahead, Tim.
I concur with Commissioner Sharp, and she and I will both be gone, so the rest of you will have to figure this out. But I'm a very simple man. I understand the explanation, Bunky. In my 3 years here, I've never gotten a straight answer. If I ask now, how much money do we have? If I ask somebody, what do we have in the bank that if something catastrophic happened that we could use? And you know, the numbers, and this was in the press, we've had 40 million, 12 million, 23 million, 38 million, 21 million. Surplus was 1 million, 1.8 million, 2 million, 2.7, conservatively, we were told on the 19th. So I'm with the Commissioner Sharp here. I just think we need a better grip. If somebody says to us or to city staff that's responsible for this, what numbers are we looking at? I don't need it to the penny, but I'd like it within $100,000.
Well, I think that's what
so-
that's what they're really trying to calculate here. That's exactly what they're trying to calculate.
But to Commissioner Sharp's point, if we ask the question now, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm not sure we'd have a number that somebody could give us today.
I think they could. They could very well do that. We can hand you a whole stack of bank statements. You can look at it and see exactly what's in the bank, but that doesn't necessarily explain all the detail involved. And it's a policy based on estimates. It's an estimated. It's going to be an estimated amount. The question is, will we develop a policy that comes up with that estimate that we're all comfortable with, that we're moving forward, we'll be able to sort of rely on it. And right now, we've had basically this, but it's never been as established as a policy that we're going to use in as part of the budgeting process. And I think that's what we obviously need to do, and hopefully we will do. But the number is going to be an estimate number. But we're going to have a means of calculating it and establishing it and moving forward with it.
Right, but Bunky, on a $38 million budget, we've had a $7 million swing.
Right.
So,
And that happens.
Well, good luck good luck next year.
And part of the problem is some of the revenues that we use are unpredictable. And then obviously we also have unpredictability with regard to what the expenses are. So it's a moving target every year. Okay.
I too share concerns of our financial status, although we are in a very positive manner I would hate to be having this discussion if we were 20 million in debt as opposed to a 20 million plus, if you will. So that is one position to look at, to sort of look at the glass half full as opposed to half empty. But in trying to move to a more stable financial position, or at least reporting position, I think this minimum fund balance establishes some guidelines or rails to help us know what the numbers are. I know you're looking at that questioning me, but it gives a formal responsibility or a form responsibility to this. I guess in looking at this, what I would like to see out of this and what is presented here is under the minimum fund balance, it says, if at the end of a fiscal year, the unassigned fund balance falls below the minimum established amount, the city shall develop a plan to rebuild the balance. In that, could we also develop for us to review, I will call kind of a cafeteria line of items that are typically used to develop and rebuild the balance.
Yeah.
So we're just not going out there, oh, I like this or that, so that there is some action or something to select from. Also a similar, and I think this would address Commissioner Sharp's concerns, what if it is above? That's what we're in a positive right now. So if it is above, our first priority is do we pay off more debt early? Do we look at paving more roads in the city, replacing water mains, replacing sewer mains?
How about a tax rebate?
Well, that could be on the list, yeah.
Right.
And I'm going to keep saying it.
Well, put it on the list. But if
'cause
we don't have those options to look at, I agree with you.
We've always had those options. What you're trying to convince me is that the words on this paper, the words, are going to change what has just happened to us going all the way back to January. The words on this paper. What I'm trying to say is I appreciate the City Manager Tedder talking about more openness. And I suspect that also means looking at internal procedures. But the fact still remains that how did we get all the way to July? And some of this is predicated on what happens at the end of a fiscal year. Well, our fiscal year ended March 31.
Right.
So just from a very elementary common sense standpoint, none of this makes sense to me. However, it doesn't matter. The 5 commissioners who passed along the tax increase, with the exception of Commissioner Bennett and myself, will be here to deal with all of this and the upcoming budget. So I'm just trying to draw out, our constituents look at this, my opinion, from a very common sense standpoint. And if it doesn't make sense to a commissioner, and if asking and asking and asking the same questions since January, February, March, etc., leaves a commissioner with confusion, what do we think it leaves the community with? Enough said from me. I understand the words on the paper. It's all of the underpinnings to me that have caused all of this, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Just one additional comment that I'll make on that too is the way that we actually have approached this policy is you'll see that in general fund water and wastewater, we are using the approved fiscal year figures. So this policy, the way that it's written now, triggers a review every single year at budget discussions to bring these numbers forward, present these numbers, and provide a current picture as to what are the budgeted expenditures for debt service, CIP, operating, but also more importantly, what's the current fund balance? What is the current net position? So the way that the policy is written, again, is it triggers a review of all of this information annually and during the budget. And I think certainly we will look at, and that was always going to be part of this policy as well, what is the plan for if it falls below the required minimum? What is the plan to replace it? What is the time frame in which it has to be replaced? But also, if there's an excess, how is that money spent? So I don't want anybody to think that this policy is going to be eventually, if it's adopted, that it just goes and sits on a shelf. I mean, again, because the policy is written in a way that the expenditures are based on approved fiscal year numbers, it has to be looked at every single year as part of the budget, because that will tell you based on the budgeted expenditures, debt service, CIP, where are you? Are you falling below the required minimum, or do you have an excess? And then certainly the next discussion is what happens if it falls below the minimum, or what happens with that excess. So it'll trigger a discussion every single year.
One of the other clarifications I would ask, again, on the calculation of minimal general fund balance, you speak of general fund 30% of FY operating budget, parens, roughly 3 months of annual operating expenses. I would like to be more specific, and not roughly 3 months, but if you would name the actual 3 months of our high season, so that we know where those figures are coming from.
I think we could even narrow it down to number of days as well. So again, if there is a desire, I think one of the next steps is that we could present the policy to the audit committee and get additional input on the framework, and then bring it back to the commissioners for further discussion. Just an idea for you to consider.
Yeah, the audit committee, according to our website, if it's accurate, consists of Jim Horty, or James Horty Sr., who's a CPA, James Little, who's also, I believe, a CPA, William Pearlstein, I'm not sure if he's a CPA, or I think he might be a lawyer. But if those are accurate, then those are the three current. I think Jim Horty might have stepped down, and we might have put somebody new on there and haven't updated the website. Email Bert right now, if you don't mind. Say who are the three members of the audit committee. So is there interest in going that route? And what would your time frame be? You would contact them immediately?
Yeah. Yep. Assuming that at least at this level we're comfortable, again, we would present this policy to them. I think part of that discussion would also be putting that plan together for what happens if it falls below or if there's an excess.
Well, I'd be interested in seeing what their percentages are. I'm very interested, obviously, in maintaining solvency in case of disasters. Here we are, a resort town. We're on the coast. We've got a hurricane forming south of us, and maintaining solvency for me is two components. One is disaster reparations. If something happens, we got to spend money, particularly on the boardwalk, but also to cover lost revenues, so that if something happens in March or April, and it's going to take us 6 months to rebuild, that we need that 6 months of reserve. And so I am actually leaning toward a higher percentage in coverage, but that's where I would be interested in this audit committee group, seeing what they recommend.
I have another question. Commissioner Gossett had made the comment, something to the effect that that might we consider a different fiscal year, and I'm certainly willing to consider something like that. But my real question is, at what point? Obviously, the city has a very cyclical year, a fiscal year in terms of how we have a season, we have, the months, we are in the middle of our high season, and then we have I don't know if we have a low season, but we have less than a high season, I guess. But at what point, I would say, if you could answer this, I don't know if you can, but in terms of revenue and expense, at what point do you feel you have a certain level of confidence about assurances of, or predictability, let's say, I'm going to use the word predictability, as to what your year-end, your year-end totals might be? I mean, like, I'm thinking by the end of the season, by September, October, we would kind of know where the expenses are going. Is that?
Yeah, expenses,
Yeah.
certainly. I mean, one of the challenges that we always have is with an April 1 fiscal year, we do a lot of purchasing in March to get ready for the upcoming fiscal year, and
Yeah.
more importantly, the upcoming summer season. The revenue is sort of across the board because
Right.
it's not quite like parking where it's consistently coming in throughout the summer. So
Right.
property tax will come in at a certain time, gross receipts, rental tax will come in at a certain time, transfer tax will come in at certain times. Utility billing is quarterly, so that comes in sporadically. So we have a lot of different revenue sources coming in at different times.
Right.
So I'd need a little bit more guidance from the finance department on, the certainty, knowing that of all the revenue sources, what's a good time to say that we have most of those revenue sources either received or coming
You
in
kind of know
shortly.
where it's, yeah.
But it's not all quite like parking, where again, parking is always usually pretty consistent. We can kind of see what the trend
Right,
is looking
because
like. throughout
I
the
mean, this takes me to when we're beginning to, and then working on the budget from January till March. I mean, I think we need, I mean, you tell me, I think we should be doing that way sooner, I mean, at least have, at least the early stages, just with, especially if we're going to be involving some kind of process here with regard to the fund balance, the anticipated fund balance. We're doing this when we really don't know. I mean, there's probably a lot of things that we maybe could have a better idea with, but I would just anticipate rethinking how our budget schedule process.
Yeah, and we've certainly thought in talking with Taylor a lot more about, preparing a lot more information, presenting it earlier, having those discussions earlier too. We typically start internal budget preparation with the staff in November, with a plan to present, one of the first budgets, the first budget meeting in January. So I think we can certainly look at trying to shift a lot of that stuff up, so we don't feel so constrained.
Okay.
Evan, I want to put a fine point on, do I have this correct? That currently we do not have a plan of what to do with the surplus
Correct.
that was presented to us, other than to put it in our quote-unquote savings.
Yeah, that's correct.
So how do we get a plan?
So this policy really is that plan. So if we were to finalize the policy, again, I'm not saying today, but if we were to finalize the policy soon, that would clearly outline what is the required minimum fund balance, and have we met that minimum fund balance? And if so, the policy would also say how that excess is spent. So finalizing this policy gives us the answer to that question.
We've been talking about this. This first presented from March. This has been 5 months of discussion and discussion. People say, well, I think it should be this, I think it should be that. I'm ready to cut to the chase here. If we institute this and then monitor it to see that, yes, we're way off or we're right on percentage-wise or what have you, it's very a poor use of all individuals' times to just keep thinking, well, I think it should be this, and the cost of wood goes up. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is as a fiduciary of this final money here, and that's what we need to be responsible for, and we're not doing that. So I would encourage us all to support this plan and move forward as soon as possible. The others individuals, our audit committee, our volunteers, but I also should think that we should look to our own auditors who we employ to give us professional answers about this information to have this policy in place as soon as possible. Thank you.
So what's the timeline?
I would like to see it for a vote at the next meeting. I don't see why we can't. We've been talking about this for 5 months. If we can't make a decision on that, then shame on us.
I'm very supportive of a vote on the August regular meeting. Anybody object?
I don't object. Has the have the auditors made any kind, in their management letter or anything, given any
So I will say
guidance?
that the auditors have looked at the fund balance policy. They actually looked at it when we had previously presented it. I think Bert had worked through some comments with them. So they've at least looked at it. They're very supportive of the policy. We sat down with them just before they started the audit, and we told them we were working on the fund balance policy. They were very happy and excited to hear that. So they've certainly taken a look at it. Again, I only brought up the audit committee if there was a desire to scrutinize the policy a little bit further. If it's taken for a vote at the August regular meeting, I think we can try and put a little bit more information together in terms of what happens if the minimum falls below or if there's an excess, and we can discuss it at that meeting, and assuming we're all happy with that plan, we can certainly vote.
Okay.
So it's August regular meeting?
That seems to be the consensus.
Well, however, we do have a problem, and I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room. It's kind of like basements. We thought we had a deal in basements, I believe, back in June, if I've got the right subject. And we had a couple of commissioners absent, and when they returned, we went off the rails again. So I think we all need to be very stalwart in the fact that if we want to move forward, we have to be committed to do so.
I'm committed to do so.
I am too.
I am.
Okay, that's 3.
Would any members of the public like to say something?
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. Couple things. I personally do not think you should be voting on this in August. It's the last meeting for 2 of your commissioners. I think you need to wait till September when you have a new complement. That's just a thought. But the other thing is, this should not be looked at once a year. You should be looking at this, if not monthly, quarterly, in my opinion. I don't know if the budget is at such a level where you're budgeting by month, but you should be able to look at your actual revenue for the months that passed and projected for the rest of the year based on a monthly budget and have an idea where you're going to be. That's one thing. The other thing is, I was an accountant. I was a CPA a long time ago. I have not kept my license active. However, the company that I worked for at the end, we had quarterly reviews from our auditors. Yes, it would cost more money, but maybe you need to have a semi-annual review so that you have an idea of where you're coming out in there are financial accounting standards out there that require estimates. Those estimates can be, they're very subjective. Your auditors have to have a role in whether they think your subjective estimates make sense. Have them look at some of that stuff quarterly or semi-annually. The other thing is I don't understand, if our year end is March 31st, we should be able to get the auditors in and start an audit 45 to 60 days out. We should not be waiting. Last year's audit report, I think, was dated in November. That's, 7 months after the end of your fiscal year. That's ridiculous, or maybe even longer than that. But that's ridiculous that it takes that long to get an audited financial statement. They need to get in sooner, and they need to get done quicker. Those would be the other things. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Jan and then Francis. Your name?
Jan Conacy, 42 Oak Avenue. I just have to echo Commissioner Sharp and Commissioner Bennett. As a citizen, I would like to know how much money do we have? Because it's very confusing trying to figure it out. And secondly, I mean, we don't pay a lot of taxes in Rehoboth. And I'm sure that almost everyone who is a Delaware resident or actually owns property here is aware that Sussex County will be raising our taxes because they lost a lawsuit. So I think, you know, what you have to look at is the combination. I mean, I've always been a Delawarean, so I'm not used to the giant taxes that people in Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, et cetera, pay. But but I am very curious too, and I'm sure everybody who's listening is, how much money do we have?
Thank you, Jan. Francis?
Hi, Francis Kelleher, 318 Stokely. Could you show the water fund, Evan? Would that be okay? I just want to make one comment on the water fund, or well, 3 little bullets. One, back in the early part of the year when we were having the special budget meetings, and I attended a good number of them, the day that raising up the water rates came up, a number of residents spoke on that. And at that time, I had gone back and looked at the budgets across as many towns as I could look at that were available online. And what I saw in terms of the water funds, of course, the state of Delaware, let me just say, regulates water utilities, except for in municipalities, unfortunately. But anyway, but the spirit of the water funds is that, and what you see in other towns is that the generated budget equals the revenue. Our water has been we have been overcharged for water as long as I think I can ever remember. I heard a very upsetting comment by one of the ex-commissioners at one of the budget meetings earlier this year where he actually said, we've dipped into the water fund. We've done that. So what I would like to say here today is I would like a hard look at the water fund. I would like to say that our water fund should not have an excess of minimum net position of $10 million, that year by year, that the budget operating expenses be targeted to equal the revenues, and that our water bills reflect what that is. If you agree on what ends up being the amount that you want to have in the disaster part, fine, then keep that there. But going forward, I think there should be a policy, a spirit that the water revenues equal the water operating budgets, and the people are charged what ends up being then the amount needed to meet that budget, and not be continuously overcharging us for water. I would like to echo Commissioner Sharp's comment about repeal. I'm asking for a repeal of the increase to the water fund, not only a repeal, but a real assessment to see what should it be, and if it should be lowered, then it should be lowered.
Thank you, Francis. Anybody else? Thank you. We have a path forward unless anybody wants to push off the vote to September. Not hearing so, then we'll keep it for the, what is it, August 16th?
Correct.
August 16th, regular meeting. Very good. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Taylor, everybody. Next item of business. Discuss a recommendation to award annual street paving contract to Mumford and Miller in the amount of $637,665.05.
Morning, Commissioners, members of the public. So I'm not going to read the whole agenda item report, which was embedded. This is part of the annual street paving and water main replacement. $500,000 was budgeted for paving and $350,000 for water main replacement. The area, and I'll show a map in a little bit, will be on First Street between Baltimore and Virginia as far as the paving, and the ocean block of Maryland as far as paving and water main replacement on one side. It's a 4-inch water main on one side currently, and that'll be increasing to an 8-inch. So there's a map with the green showing, I probably could have had that a little bolder, of the areas of the paving. And again, the water main replacement is just on Maryland Avenue. So in June, it was put out to bid in 2 newspapers in northern Delaware. It was the same 3 companies that bid last year. Adel won the bid for FY24. And just, I mentioned that we go to northern Delaware because we're looking for large construction companies, construction companies that can do the water main replacement as well as the paving and not sub that work out. So this is the engineer's estimate for the work. It's a very detailed document, basically 90 pages, very specific about the work that's requested. It's $817,000. The 3 companies that bid were Mumford and Miller, Adel, and George and Lynch. And as you can see, Mumford and Miller was the low bid. And so the requested action is at the meeting next Friday to approve the award of the street paving and water main replacement to Mumford and Miller for the amount that was bid. For amount they bid, excuse me. So here's a little bit of detail as far as the 3 bids. There's the base bid for the paving. The add-alt 1 is the water main replacement on Maryland. The add-alt 2 is crack seal on joints and pavement cracks. And that is in other areas of the city that we deem it necessary, and that work is usually done in the spring. And add-alt 3 is the homeowner work. When the homeowner requests, as mentioned, we give them the opportunity to work on their driveway or their sidewalk. We don't charge for permits for that. The contractor's already mobilized, so if they want to bid on that, they can do that. And that is what add-alt 3 is. And then they pay pay the city direct, and that goes into a revenue fund. I'm not sure which one. So that's the all I have on it, the gist of it. Are there any questions?
Who's the engineering company that we use for recommendations?
Wallace Montgomery. And they did it last year, and the engineer that had done it was with a different company before, and he's been working with the city for several years.
All righty. So if there's no questions, we'll put this on the August 16th regular meeting for consideration.
Mayor, we couldn't just vote on to approve this
This is a
today?
workshop meeting, no.
Why not? I thought we had talked about this before, that we could. Alex?
So at one level here.
Alex?
So at one level, FOIA requires detailing what action will be taken. In the agenda, it says discuss the recommendation, so it doesn't provide for action.
So going forward, if we adjusted our language a bit on workshop agendas, we could maybe move things along a little faster. That would be what I would do, but I won't be here, so good luck.
All right. Thank you, Henry.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item of new business, which is to discuss a draft process to develop a mixed-use zoning ordinance. Do you need it on the screen, or do you have it?
We can put it on the screen.
And, or, you want to put me this back?
Well, good morning, Mayor and Commissioners and members of the public. So this is a discussion to develop, this is a work plan to develop a mixed-use zoning classification with flexible regulations, community and business stakeholder input, limited to the city's commercial district with appropriate design guidelines or standards and protection of nearby residential and commercial properties. So that's the purpose of this work plan. So by way of background, the development of a mixed-use zoning classification was identified as a top priority following the adoption of the 2020 City of Rehoboth Beach Comprehensive Development Plan by the Board of Commissioners and Planning Commission. Specifically, this priority was articulated to examine and evaluate a new mixed-use zoning classification with flexible regulations, as I just articulated, with flexible regulations, community and business stakeholder input, limited to the city's commercial district with appropriate design guidelines or standards and protections for nearby residential and commercial properties. The approach of this work group for discussion is in conjunction with Wallace Montgomery, our planning consultant. Staff will facilitate a work group comprised of representatives from the following entities with approval from you all, from the Board of Commissioners. It is suggested to have 2 representatives from the Board of Commissioners, 2 representatives from the Planning Commission, 2 representatives from the Builder Development Community, and another local representative from Rehoboth Beach Main Street, as well as 2 business and or citizen representatives. The meetings is proposed for the work group to meet on a regular basis 6 times over a 10 to 11th month period. All meetings will be open to the public. The work group will be considered a task force, and as such, meetings shall be noticed. A quorum must be present to conduct business, and meeting minutes will be taken and will be conducted according to all FOIA regulations. The first is proposed that the first and second meetings will focus on agreeing to the main tenets, things such as height, bulk standards, utilization of the design manual, et cetera, things such as that. The main tenets will be presented to the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners for comment and input. And then upon feedback from the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners on these main tenets, staff with assistance from Wallace Montgomery will draft ordinance language from the work group for the work group to review and comment on. Once the final draft is developed, and the target for that is the next 3 meetings, it will be presented to the Planning Commission for their comment and public input, and then recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. Upon receipt of the recommendations from the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners will conduct a public hearing for consideration of adoption. Included in this agenda item report, I have a proposed timeline. I always like proposed timelines to give us a target. And so I'm not going to go into that here unless you would like me to. It's proposed to, I'll just outline it broadly. It's proposed to, once should you all agree to move forward with this, we would come back, a press release would go out asking for potential members. We would bring back that membership list to the Board of Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners would agree and assign those members. We would hopefully start in September or October of this year. and then finish up, and sometime, hopefully if we follow the timeline, in August of next year with an adopted ordinance. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Obviously, we're looking for favorable response from the commissioners. In terms of the time frame there, I think I might like to talk with you, tweak it a little bit, because we need to approve it. And then, as you mentioned, soliciting membership, appointing members, and then first meeting, maybe November instead of what you have there. But I think it's all very workable. Again, we want to get favorable response from the commissioners up here. And then I don't know that the Planning Commission has had any, I think they've viewed this, the vice president and the chair, and I don't think that they have any problem with it either. So comments from the commissioners?
I'm just extremely pleased to see this. This has been such a long time coming, Mary Ellen, and to actually have someone bring to us an agenda item report that is well done, and to actually map out that even as your first pass on your timeline, it would be approximately a year from now, that it would really have the meat and the substance to it. I'm just extremely excited to see it, and congratulations on putting this forward at this time. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Me too. I wholly agree with Commissioner Sharp.
Also, I certainly support this coming forward. And just tweaking this a bit, or just curious if you would, in the further, define the commercial districts. I think we understand what they appear to be, but based on zoning, what do those commercial districts exist? Does this address the boardwalk also? I'd also look to in mothballs, I guess it is, the Baltimore-Wilmington Streetscape Committee, as to materials and information that they had brought forward. It seems to be stagnated. There were suggestions and visions that they had created. Don't know what's happening with them. And I'd also certainly have Wallace Montgomery or others. I don't know if they're well-versed, but there are certainly other consulting firms that are very well based in form-based codes, which I think are something that needs to be looked at for the commercial district and also for the future growth and management of the commercial district, if you will. But those are my comments, but again, I'm glad to see this moving forward. I hope it keeps the momentum going up.
All right. Anybody? Harvey?
Harvey Shulman, 149B Henlopen Avenue. I want to second what Commissioner Sharp said about this is a great plan. Ever since 2001, when I was first on the Planning Commission, we've been talking about mixed use. And like many things that get proposed in the city, a lot of the changes, site plans, whatever they are, actually had to be initiated and the work done by the Planning Commission. This is something that the city staff apparently is taking over, being proactive on, so thank you very much for that. I have two specific comments. On the list of the members of the working group, I guess I would urge you to make sure that there are enough representatives who are not affiliated with the business community and are really just residents, because as I look through the list, and I don't see it now, but you know, there was Main Street, there was development interests, there were business and or citizen representatives, and you know, if you add up the numbers, it's conceivable that there might only be one or two actual, quote, residents who live here year-round and have to deal with the consequences of this. Reminds me a little bit of, you read a recipe book and the recipe looks terrific, right? And you move ahead, you put it in the oven, and then it comes out of the oven and you say, did I really make this? Or, do I want to eat this? And that ties into who the representatives are, but also the one other maybe caution I would suggest going forward as you plan this. Many of us remember the conflicts that existed for a number of years when there were business or commercial developments just facing back to back or backing up to residences. There was noise, there were lighting issues, there were crowds on the street late at night. There really were a lot of real world consequences. It sounded like a great theory, and when I first got on the Planning Commission, I was a strong proponent of mixed use, and I still feel it's a good idea. But we have to be cognizant that if you start having people living right on top of some of these buildings or right next door to them in the commercial area, that there are going to be people who live there, and maybe you could say they should have known it, but why are there noises until this time at night? Why am I hearing music? Why is there lighting from the sign in the restaurant or the bistro next door? There really are potential conflicts, and as this process moves along, I just ask you to keep those in mind, so whatever the recipe is, and then it gets put in the oven and it comes out, and then it actually gets adopted, and we see how it works out, that you've planned as much as you can to minimize the kind of conflicts we've had before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harvey. Anybody else?
One other closing comment, if I may add. Director Gray, you may want to reference back, talking about past experiences, the architectural design manual that was developed in November of 2007. Again, that was made up of a group of individuals that included residents from each of the 5 neighborhoods. So I think that's something that could add to also your background material that should be considered.
All right, thank you. We've got a path forward on that. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Welcome.
Thank you, Taylor. Evan, you helped also. With that, our next item of new business is discuss an ordinance to amend Chapter 92, Section 38, titled Parking Restricted for certain vehicles related to the parking, storing, or leaving of vehicles and trailers. Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Bring it up here.
And if you could turn the controls over to the lectern, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. You have the background materials on this that was presented in the agenda, but I've also come along here, and let's see if I can see that. Is that the one? I have to go up here to find it, and then we'll go from there. How about that? Okay, so what we're here today to discuss is this proposed amendment to the City Code, Chapter 92, Section 38, parking, storing, or leaving trailers of oversized vehicles. What problem were we trying to solve? Basically, why are we here? And this is the prolonged parking of trailers and oversized vehicles on the city streets and on private property here in the city. Just a background of definitions in 92-1 automobile vehicles and traffic. A vehicle is basically transported or drawn. It can be driven or drawn. We define in here a trailer in our code that it's without motive power. It doesn't have an engine, has to be drawn. And a motor vehicle is self-propelled, can be driven. Just kind of keep that as a background of what we have to deal with. So why are we trying to solve the problem again? Beginning in July of 2022, the city received complaints from residents about a trailer being parked on the city street and or in front yard or a prolonged period of time. That trailer is still there today. And again, in our speed of, this has been 2 years we've been dealing with this. So again, trying to solve the problem, and the city has increasingly received multiple complaints about trailers and such vehicles in the past few years. we cannot resolve these complaints because there are differing interpretations about whether the trailers are compliant with our current code. We need to resolve this uncertainty, in my opinion, and that's what I'm attempting to present information today to do that. Again, why are we trying to solve the problem? We have complaints have focused on the negative effects of trailers and such vehicles on streetscape, keeping the condition of our community in a positive manner. We've also taken similar steps on that when we decided to implement the time limits on keeping trash cans out on the streets so that we know that we're trying to keep the streets clean. We now have enforcement of keeping trash cans in and out. Again, streetscape cleanliness. We've also just decreased availability of street parking. If a trailer is parked on the street, that's one less place for a car to park. If the trailer is parked in a yard, that car then is parking on the street. We have undermining the goal of maintaining open space. We cherish our character of the city of Rehoboth Beach, our tree city, to keep open space. Trailer doesn't really meet that need, in my opinion, of open space. We also have the increased safety risks to pedestrians, bicycles, and other vehicles. If you're walking, riding your bicycle, it's hard to see around a trailer. They block your vision. If they're parked close to a corner, you can't see around. Other vehicles, the same problem, seeing vision that impairs your vision of seeing around corners or around a vehicle that's parked in the right-of-way, a large vehicle. So again, in the investigation of these complaints, it was determined there have been, over time, conflicting interpretations of our current city code, making it unclear where our trailers may be parked for a prolonged period of time. How do we solve this problem? What I'd like to approach is amended the City Code, Chapter 92, Section 38, to provide our clarification regarding the parking, storing, or leaving trailers or any vehicle of any type over a certain length on any street or within the corporate limits of the city of Rehoboth Beach. So this is two phases that I would like to approach it on. The proposed ordinance would amend the section 9238 in two parts, with certain exceptions that I will go into in just a moment. The first part would provide that no vehicle 22 feet 3 inches or longer or 8 feet 1 inch or wider may be parked on any city street. That is our current code. That is in place and has been. What we want to do is add the information of or stored on left on any city street, and no trailer of any size may be parked, stored, or left on any city street. Go back to earlier, those definitions of trailer, motor vehicle, and vehicle. Second approach on this would be that no vehicle over 22 feet 3 inches in length or 8 feet 1 inch in width or wider may be parked anywhere within the city's corporate limits. That is our current code. That's in place. Again, to enhance this or to further clarify this, to add the aspect of stored or left anywhere within the city corporate limits, even if not on a street, and no trailer of any size may be parked, stored, or left anywhere within the city corporate limits, even if it's not on a street. Now, that is an explanation and an expansion of what we currently have, but there are exceptions that would allow parking on streets or private property and build on other code provisions that currently exist within our codes. They would include, and as the material that has been passed out has been embedded, the legalese up there that Alex understands more than I do. I tried to put this in plain English for everyone. So this first tenet here, the first aspect, is allow trailer parking in the convention center parking lot with a permit. This is the current policy that we have for buses that exist. It's a simple process. We just expand it to trailers to give another alternative for parking place for trailers. The second is that expand this or to condition this that allows trailers to park on the street for up to 2 days, primarily targeted at moving vans, people moving in and out. If you're having a large delivery of materials, if you're building a house having kitchen materials or any type of building materials delivered, that up to 2 days could be, a trailer could be left on the street. The third is based on the current code, which allows garage parking of vehicles and trailers. If you have a garage, you can keep your trailer or any vehicle in your garage on private property, obviously. The next one, this is based on our current code, which allows parking of allows parking on private property for business vehicles and added trailers. This is existing in our code. I'm just trying to bring this in so it's all in one place so people can understand it. Now, the key here is, though, that the property, the business, has to be located on which is located and from which is operated. So if the business is not being operated from that place, then the trailer cannot be stored there or eat there. But the business has to be located, which is located, and from which is operated. And again, that's our current code, just bringing this over into expanding the 9238. And the fifth aspect is incorporated by reference in our current code, which allows for outdoor storage of an antique motor vehicle on private property. This, again, is an existing in our code, just trying to bring it into 9238 so that you don't have to go looking all around and have conflicts. This is what we're trying to clear up, bring it all into one place. That is an existing part of our code, that if you have an antique motor vehicle, it may be stored in the open on private property. And then the last one is about construction vehicles or trailers. This allows trailers parking on a private property for up to 30 days in any 6-month period, if being used in connection with and during permitted construction for longer, but if it's longer than 30 days, we have an existing code that allows that individual to go to the Board of Adjustments to get permission to go beyond that period of time. The Board of Adjustments does have the ability, I'll read it to you, that is, again, in our current code, that the Board of Adjustments, as provided by this code, and provided that such uses will not adversely affect the use of neighboring property nor injure the character of the neighborhood. In granting a special exception, the Board of Adjustments may include such conditions that deem it necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the city, including time limitations. So again, that's our existing code, expanding it to trailers to include that, bringing this into expanding 9238. So again, exceptions in plain English, this is my interpretation. So under these exceptions, you will be allowed to park a trailer or an oversized vehicle on the street or on private property within the city if, 1, if it is parked in the convention center lot, 2, if it is for 48 hours or less, 3, if it's in a garage on private property. The next, if it's used for business and located at the business location, as I stipulated before, and if it is an antique motor vehicle, existing code, and if it's being used during construction. Again, those are the exceptions that would apply to trailers being allowed to park either on public property or on private property, as I proposed it here. Trying to condense it into a little bit into plain English, but that's how I want to approach this, and I think from the standpoint, I've been dealing this with 2 years, and some opinion people longer than 2 years. This is an approach that I would like to bring to the commissioners for discussion and action.
Good job putting it together. This is, for me, it's a complicated issue. I will say that where I live on the corner of Cookman and 3rd Street, that I have a house being built on the back corner of my property, so I've been going through that. There was a total house remodel directly next door to me, and that's been going on for quite a bit. And then across the street from that corner house, the same people bought it and are doing a whole house renovation. So I'm not immune to any of this also. I do want to share that I drove around, and you know, just like anything, there has to be something, or something causes us to start looking at something. And I think your one slide with the ugly trailer is what started it for constituents and for us. And you know, I have to admit, I went by there this weekend, and I would shouldn't say this, but I would swear that the owner's giving us the middle finger, because that trailer is out on the shoulder of the road, just as ugly as can be. Now, what I'm amazed at also is that our constituents, and some constituents have complained about it even though they live 10 blocks away. So it shows me that it bothers more than just the immediate neighbors. But I guess what I'm surprised is that there hadn't been even more complaints about what I would classify that particular yard as a junkyard with all their construction stuff in it. I built my own house. I remodeled my house, and it took me twice as long as a normal contractor. But I at least, this is 24 years ago, but at least I cleaned up my site every day. And yeah, I had roll-off dumpster there most of the time. And those were the days when they were free. Now I think they charge you for it or something. But so this weekend, so anyhow, I'm concerned about beyond just that trailer, the rest of the yards and how they're kept clean. So I drove around this weekend and looked at a lot of new house construction. And they have, what I found was they have construction trailers there that are open as well as enclosed, some with ladders on top, some not. I think everyone was parked on the property. You've got porta potties. Hey, it's silly. I wouldn't want to look at a porta potty. They can be on there year round as long as they're on private property. And I'm just sharing with you what I saw. Roll-off dumpsters that collect debris or something. There's, as long as they're on private property, they're allowed year round also. They're not the prettiest things. You can put the roll-off dumpsters on the street, but not during the summertime because there's restrictions to it. There were forklifts out there. There were flatbed trucks. There were other things. And of course, just driving around town, I also saw boat trailers and small trailers for jet skis and motorcycles and beach equipment and stuff. You know, it's amazing how many tourists, I guess, bring a small little trailer that's small enough to pull behind their car that has beach equipment and coolers and stuff on it and everything. So for me, I would not, I'm struggling with some of it, I have to be honest with you. But in terms of parking in the municipal lot, if we're complaining about aesthetics on lots that are our neighbors, I don't see why we're promoting trailers parking on the municipal lot. I would not be for that. But does this, Evan, does this address Deauville Beach when we had momentum last time and we stopped and withheld voting on something that was specific to amending language about Deauville Beach? And it seems like we still have not gotten there yet. So that would need to be added, correct?
It does look like the, thanks, Mayor, it does look like the proposed ordinance that's in the agenda does remove that reference, so.
Okay, so we need to go back and see what we held off on and perhaps put that in there. But the one thing that gives me the biggest pause right now is merely that we haven't received, the commissioners and the public haven't received any analysis from the police department, the parking department, city administration, if they want to supply, and then a legal review. We haven't received any of that yet. And that's usually something that should be part of the support package. So those are my hesitations right now.
Well, Mayor, those are also concerns of mine of the departmental review and legal review. That has been shared with those departments that you have mentioned. They have brought concerns back to us, which myself I've responded to. Evan and I are working on those. Alex was not available last week, so he is just cursorily looked at this, so we do expect a full response from Alex, and I certainly wouldn't move forward without that. But you go back to talk about this trailer, that trailer. Again, that is the issue that I hope this change would correct, in the sense it's a trailer is a trailer. If it's a duck, it's a duck, as opposed to a boat trailer and a ski-doo trailer and this type of information. You know, my concern is trying to maintain the 50,000-foot level of this is the character and consistency and cleanliness and open space of our community. And I just feel that this is a way that we can approach that, and that is the direction that I want to take this piece of legislation into. You know, there's going to be exceptions to everything, and what is the saying? The innocent or the perfect is the
Enemy of the good.
enemy of the good. You know, we also have other storage lots around town. It doesn't have to be limited to the municipal lot. We have Oyster House Road. We have the Board of Public Works areas that if that could be possibly made available. There are other, again, properties that the city owns and has access to that are secured areas. But, you know, you look at many homeowners associations and planned communities, and you can't have a trailer at all, no matter where you put it. It's just not applicable. Not that we want to become the homeowner police here, but I think that is something that, you know, looking in the future of our character and maintaining the character of Rehoboth Beach, this is something considered. I mean, you yourself brought forward the aspect of the trash bins and recycling bins and yard waste containers and maintaining what it looks like on our streets. So I just think that was something that we all agreed to and work towards and have in place. And I parallel this in the same regard. Again, there's going to be exceptions to everything, but I believe this is a strong start, and it gives our staff the tools that they need to maintain the character of the city.
I applaud you for getting this far, but you know, I do want to see, and I'd like forwarded to me all the departmental reports so that I
We'll
can
all get them.
compare.
They'll be public records. It's transparency.
Well, we haven't gotten them for this meeting.
I understand that, but I'm trying to move this forward at a pace that we're not used to.
And there's other questions. I mean, there are, and that may or may not be good, but you know, I have questions such as they're allowed to park for 48 hours or less. How do we enforce that?
How do we enforce parking right now?
How do we, for 48 hours, that means they could be parking in front of Harvey's house, and then the next 48 hours in front of Matt's house, and then the next 48.
No, you can pick this apart all you want to, but
Well, I think we need to address these.
accomplish this. We have the same thing with somebody illegally parked in front of my house now or somebody else's house. There are exceptions, but we have ways that other code that we have in place, we utilize those same types of things. You know, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be questions, but we have nothing to do with this right now. The interpretation is so varied that we can't even approach this.
Anybody else?
Yes, I want to thank Commissioner Gossett for bringing this forward. It's a long time coming. I am one of the people that lives on Henlopen Avenue that drives by this, and it's a running joke within the neighborhood that we've allowed this to go on for as many months as we have. I will say I met with Chief Banks and Building and Licensing earlier in the year, and it wasn't just this trailer. There was a motorcycle trailer and there was a boat trailer as well. So we were getting trailer creep coming into the neighborhood. And I will say, thanks to our new enforcement officers and the police, they did get the boat trailer removed and the motorcycle trailer has been removed. And so this one, I agree with you. I think every time we go by, it gets moved a little bit. It's almost hanging in the street at this point when I drove by yesterday. And it's unsightly, and I agree with Commissioner Gossett's proposal here that we need to move forward on something, and then we can pick this apart all the ways we would like to, but I think in terms of moving forward with what a definition of a trailer is, which was what we were hung up on in January, I think we have 36 different definitions or mentions of trailers within city code, and that's just crazy. So thank you, Commissioner Gossett, for putting this forward, and I suppose we'll hear from some of the residents on this.
You have anything you'd like to say?
I'll wait till after the residents.
Okay.
They've waited long enough.
Okay, we'll go to the members of the public. Whatever is it? We've got Walter and then Matt. You know, Matt, go ahead. He's waving you forward. State your name and relationship to the city.
Matt Gaffney, 140 Henlopen. Thank you all for finally addressing this. It's much appreciated, and Patrick for doing the initial heavy lifting. I do have two concerns and two questions. I'm looking at the red line copy of your changes. It's line 16, starting with the word "except." And my concern here is about creating loopholes. I don't want us to create any loopholes that we can avoid. So the way this reads now, except that if any such vehicle or any such trailer meets all of the other requirements of this Chapter 92, including specifically but not limited to Article 21, vehicles in combination, and Article 25, registration and licenses. I'm concerned about that section, and partially due to language in Mary Ellen Gray's letter to us when we first challenged the trailer at 149A. Basically, her reason for allowing it to stay was and I'm reading directly from her letter. So if the trailer located at 149A Henlopen is properly registered and it is parked either in the driveway or on the right-of-way in a parking spot, then it is considered to be code compliant. Well, in fact, it was not properly registered. I do believe it is now properly registered, but registration alone, I don't think should be a reason to have a trailer. We could all have a trailer on our property if it's properly registered. I don't think that's the look we want for Rehoboth. So that section concerns me. And then the second question is, if this is approved by the commissioners, what would the timeline be for enforcement? Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Walter?
Thank you. Walter Brittingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. Thank you for very well-written piece of information. I think it might need a few additions. One of the items is more than just the trailer sitting there. It's the tree company that comes in and blocks the whole street, or blocks both ends of it, or lets their vehicle sit out in the street. And I use the term building canyons when big construction and or different types of vehicles build on both sides of the street. And it's intimidating to go through when you, on the north, especially on the north side of town, you have the people coming up on the trail, the 16-mile trail, and all the bicycles and all the people walking their kids. That's before you put cars on it and people going too fast and trying to pass. A separate demeanor that needs to be thrown in it. In many cases, we have white or yellow lines parked. First Street strikes me particularly. And we regularly have vehicles parked, licensed vehicles, parked over the lines out in the street, left there. First Street on both north and south of Rehoboth Avenue is extremely narrow, and I drive a Ford Ranger, and even I have to worry about my mirrors or hitting anybody else, and there is no enforcement when people park over the line. I don't even know if there's anything covered in it. Trailers and or construction equipment might be different because I made complaints to both building and licensing and the police department and the administration people. At Brighton Suites on the north side of town, they had a personnel lift, and it was wider than the outside of the wheel to the outside of the wheel. and it stayed there for weeks. And we had a devil of a time, and I said, if you don't have a law to cover it, could you ask them to pull around the corner on Delaware Avenue or someplace like that so vehicles could get up and down the road? Then you go into, when they become bigger than a dumpster, they become construction containers in my language. And there are, I think the city needs to address construction containers. I've seen them on Rehoboth Avenue, you see them all over town. But not everything has to be a 30-yard container. You could put a smaller container that has a lower height, different length, but it shouldn't block other places. Our police department
Wrap it
and
up,
other,
please.
understood.
Thank you.
Our police department and other people need to have a lesson in marking of traffic and putting cones. You don't put little green cones like the tree people do to protect their truck. You put out markers, compliant markers in accordance with the state standards leading up so you see it ahead of time.
Thank you,
very much.
Walter. Harvey?
Harvey Shulman, 149B. Hello.
B is in.
Please let's remember where this started. You all were going to amend, and you have to amend 9238 to deal with the Deauville Beach parking lot. This deals with that situation, but at the time you were discussing that several days ago, I made some comments about this other issue and said, you're opening that door on 9238, clean it up with some other stuff, particularly trailers. Many of you made some very good comments, including you, Mayor. Well, what about this? What about that? And all we said is, we're trying to solve a simple problem. We're not trying to undo other parts of the code. I suggested at the time something like 10 words. And then you said, but yeah, but it might have a conflict with this or that. So what Commissioner Gossett did is he made it very clear by these exceptions that we're not undoing other parts of the code. All the concerns that you all raised, I think he's tried to respond to very responsibly. To respond to a couple of questions, Mayor, that you and others or comments made here, there's absolutely nothing in this proposal, and I've read every single word of it multiple times. There's nothing that requires the city manager to allow any trailer of any size to be parked in the municipal lot. All this does is give him authority to do that if he wants to do it, which is actually better than the current law, which actually directs the city manager to allow oversized vehicles in the municipal lot. This actually gives him greater discretion to deal with it. If he decides trailers look bad or whatever, he doesn't have to do it. And to that point, for those of you who are concerned about what are the poor people going to do with these things, I went online and found many places on Route 1, whether you have a 50-foot vehicle or a 20-foot or a 10-foot, you can store your vehicle at a number of places on Route 1 or in Lewis or Georgetown or whatever. So this is not as, as severe as it may seem. There were other questions raised about porta potties and other things. We're not trying to clean up every scar on streetscape. We could spend weeks or months doing that, okay? This is a problem at a few pieces of property and multiple pieces of property over the years. It deals with oversized vehicles and trailers. That's it. Not porta potties. You want to deal with that stuff? Great, another time. Another comment was made by one of my neighbors about concern about, well, it seems to allow licensed vehicles. That's the predicate for what follows. So it refers to the other sections of the code because it has to be a licensed vehicle to begin with, and it has to be what's defined as a combination in another section of the code where there is a combination as opposed to just a separate trailer. But once it meets those things, once it's licensed, it can still be parked or stored only if it meets the other exceptions. So this absolutely does not say because something has a license or tag, anything goes. A comment was made about the planning director's interpretation. I don't want to get into that, except to say that I don't agree with it, but here's the point. That was under chapter 270 of the code. She was interpreting a zoning section that uses the word trailer. This is chapter 92 of the code, which actually has a definition of trailer in it. As she said in her opinion, the zoning code doesn't have a definition of trailer. So whatever was said about that has nothing to do with this. This is why its suggestion is you do it in 9238.
Thank you.
And then I think my last point, if I may, is please keep in mind that this recognizes the Board of Adjustment authority. If someone truly has a problem and they need something there, and it needs to be more than 30 days for construction, and it's a trailer, they can go to the Board of Adjustment. And on any project, remember, this so-called construction project has been going on a 500 square foot house for over 2 years.
Thank you.
And the code apparently allows that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Your name and relationship.
Hi, good morning. Elise Burns, 130 Henlopen Avenue. First, Patrick, thank you for taking the time, listening to us, and putting forward this proposal. Tim, thank you. We have been trying to get something done, help from all of you, for 2 years. The code enforcement planning director, they're tied up in knots over the conflict of the code. Tim has been trying to help us for 2 years, to no avail. We're not getting anywhere. Finally, we have this window of opportunity to finally address trailers. It's become a dangerous situation on Henlopen Avenue. Yes, Mayor Mills, that trailer is in the street. Tomorrow will be Farmers Market Day. You should see the chaos in that first block coming from Grove Park. Bicyclists, pedestrians, moms with strollers, then the trucks, the tree trucks, the trash truck, and then that trailer is sticking out in the street. We are this close to having an accident on Farmers Market Day. Something needs to be done, and thank you for putting this forward, and I just hope we can move this forward and get a vote on the 16th. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Name and relationship.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Jamil Berteau, 138 Henlopen Avenue. Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, I want to echo my support for what my direct neighbors have said. The proposed amendment is a good compromise, and I thank Commissioner Gossett for proposing it. Rehoboth is a resort town, and we need to maintain its appearance, as you said. All of us, as property owners, have a responsibility to do our parts. Henlopen Avenue, for example, is on the main bicycle route and one of the first roads many tourists see arriving in Rehoboth. The derelict trailer that has been at 149A Henlopen since March 2022 is a major eyesore. We all seem to be in agreement on that. I live directly across the street from it, and I'm tired of looking at it. And frankly, I'm tired of seeing people stopping to stare at it. I do want to make a comment. While our house was being rebuilt, we rented a storage unit, and they also have spaces for rent for vehicles and trailers. And the monthly cost was very reasonable, and it's really close to Henlopen Avenue, at least this particular storage unit place. I do believe that the current code needs to be amended, and the proposed ordinance should be voted on at the August 16 regular meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
If we're done,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, one more.
Go
One
ahead.
more. Jan?
Jan Conacy, 42 Oak Avenue. I just want to say that for at least 5 years, the Church Hotel on the corner of 2nd and Oak Avenue put a dumpster on the street, right on the property line on Lake Gerard, okay? For 5 years, the neighbors complained. Everybody who comes out of the Pines, they come down 2nd Street, they walk around there and had to walk around the dumpster. It was a safety hazard and it was horrible. The neighbors complained, but finally, we all got together about a year ago, and there were 8 of us, and we wrote. At the time, we had a different city manager. He was here for a short period of time. I don't know what happened in building and licensing. I don't know anything. We wrote to the code inspector at the time, and he turned it over to building and licensing. And the city manager at the time told them, get it off. You know, we asked that it be moved back onto their property and that it be screened. Not a big deal, you know. There is not a single other dumpster in any hotel anywhere in the city of Rehoboth outside, visible on the street. And we pointed all of that information out and sent pictures. And I feel like I'm going through deja vu listening to this again. And this city manager and Corey, they just told them they had to remove it. And they did. You know, it was gone. Now, they fought it for 6 months, but they eventually gave in and moved it. It's not perfect. It's still sitting, but it's back against their place and it's got a fence around it. But you know, the city needs to move and take care of these things. As Patrick said, you go into an HOA, you don't see this stuff. You know, our houses are costing more and more and more, and people expect more and more and more. And when I go down, I used to walk all over before my accident, and I see the boat on Felton Street. My God, that's been there for years. It's awful. I see the trailer on Henlopen Avenue, but I don't see it in other places. And Stan, when you talked about trailers we have had construction at 46 Oak, at 38 Oak, across the street at, I don't know what their number is, 43 Oak. Our street has been construction for 6 years. Never has anybody left anything overnight. When those big flatbeds come down the street to leave lumber, they unload the lumber and they take off. So I don't know where they're leaving them overnight. The only thing we've had is a pod in people's property. The porta toilets have been sitting out on city property for 7.5 months. And when I called to find out, I said, you know, I remember when we did a remodel 20 years ago, we had to keep it on our property. By the way, every worker in town goes by the porta toilet sitting out there so they don't have to go to Grove Park to the bathroom. So it's a constant stream of anyway, the city didn't enforce their own code. They knew it was out there until we complained. As a citizen, we didn't know. So all over, these porta toilets are supposed to be on people's property. And most contractors don't do it unless the city makes them.
Thank you,
So you
Jan.
need to fix this.
Thank you, Jan. Anybody else? If not, we'll bring it back to the table. Commissioner Markert?
Mayor, I asked to speak after the
were you-
public.
Okay.
Oh, you first?
I am.
Okay.
She's
I'm
first.
first.
She's first.
I defer.
I just want to say, and the reason I wanted to wait until all of this was heard, full well knowing what was coming, that there is no justification to prolong this any longer. There just isn't. You might want to make some innocuous statements or trying to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but there is no justification for this. And to prolong the problem, every time you do that, you don't move anything forward, which is obvious. It hasn't been moved forward. So I would hope that we just cut to the chase and go ahead and take the option and the action to put this on the agenda for August 16th, or somebody justify why you can't.
I'd like to add to that. I too think this is just gone way beyond how long it has taken. And I look at this, I appreciate the effort that I know Patrick and Tim and others have been involved in this. But and I also appreciate the plain English, which helps me understand a little bit better. But the part of the thing is, I think you can distill a lot about Rehoboth. I've always sort of regarded Rehoboth being into sort of two factions, and not necessarily that they're diametrically opposed or anything, but there's obviously a faction of people that take very seriously the freedoms they have as property owners, and I certainly appreciate those. And I also consider the value of establishing certain community standards. And I think one of the things that I think this commission and our city government has attempted to do is to maintain some semblance of balance between those two forces. I think they both serve the public, but at the same time, sometimes you have to intercede. And I see this strictly as that. I think we have the ability, being the unique seaside town that we are, with trees and pretty houses and the conditions we have, to be able to establish the standards that we all want to adhere to. And then, especially a street, there are many streets in Rehoboth, but some are kind of nicer than others. And I would certainly add Henlopen as being one of the nicer ones. And why we would want to tolerate, this, I can't see anything other than a nose thumbing at the neighbors. And I think we have the right to be able to stand up and say, no, you can't do this. And that's why I feel strongly about this. And I think if we can make some attempt to resolve this, again, it may require some additional tweaking or maybe some adjustment and so forth. There's a couple items here that I don't quite understand, but I can certainly discuss that offline here. But it may require some additional things. But I think this is something that we can certainly address at our next meeting and approve it at our next meeting. Thank you.
I'm kind of reading the tea leaves here that there's at least 4 that want to move this forward.
Yes, this one's not hard to read the room.
And we're missing 2 people, so.
That's too bad.
I still think it needs
Not
its
here.
legal review and the department reviews, but.
Those are in process.
We've got marching orders, so we're going to have a full plate on the 16th.
So again, we can't vote on this today?
No.
We've got to change our language so that we can have more flexibility. Well, actually, you guys might want to change your language to have more flexibility.
All righty. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. With that, we're moving on to the next item. Oh, my goodness. Commissioner announcements and comments. I don't have any. Anybody?
I do. I have 2 things.
Commissioner Sharp.
Last time we talked, this is to City Manager Tedder, I had brought up whether or not we had confidence in the tax bills that went out, and it was explained that what caused some bills not to be particularly accurate was a human error, and I just wanted to know, was there any other things that have surfaced, or do we have 100% confidence in the accuracy of the tax bills?
We have reviewed them, and we do have confidence that they're correct.
We do? Okay, that's good to hear. And I just wanted to give another shout out. Over the last few months, these agenda item reports have gotten better and better at synthesizing and putting into English what the issue is, what we're trying to solve, and what the action could be. So that needs to really continue, because I think it's a benefit. I've gotten a couple calls from constituents that say it's so much easier to follow along with what the commissioners are dealing with. So thank you for that.
Very good. With that, review. You have a comment? Go ahead.
Just to report back, with regards to the fund balance policy, the investment policy, which we passed in December of 2022, also included a specific call out of reporting procedures, that the investment policy is to be updated in July, October, January, and April. I would like to see that also included in the investment policy. Also, I think, Mayor, you had made mention, if I remember correctly, there was going to be an update on committees at the August workshop. Obviously, that didn't occur.
Yeah, no.
What is the status of that?
Status of that is at this point that in conversation with Evan and Taylor, we're going to put that on the October workshop meeting.
Okay. Keeping up our pace here. The other thing is, it's been mentioned with regards to the absence of the commissioners. And
With the what?
the absence of commissioners at workshop or regular meetings. And we all have issues that come up and prevent us from attending. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I will say that I believe it is their responsibility to be prepared with the information when they arrive at the meeting, of the meetings that they have missed. It is not our responsibility to sit here and go over the same mission or same information that was discussed at the meeting that they missed. If they're not up to speed, that's their fault. It is not our responsibility to spoon feed them again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, the review future meeting dates, Friday, August 16th, 2:00 p.m. is our regular meeting. As you know at this point, we do have an opportunity for citizen comment if for topics off the agenda. Does anybody have anything? If not, then I want to adjourn this meeting at 11:37 a.m. Thank you very much.